Gentlemen, how are you? It's good to see you all again, or see Gigi's meme and the two of you.
Hello,
All good.
hello.
So it's been a while since we all spoke, minus Gigi and I had a brief chat yesterday. We hadn't spoken in a while, but Andre and I were messaging lately, and we thought it would be one, just fun to hang out and chat and catch up, and two, talk a little bit about Madeira, Bitcoin Atlantis, what Pablo and Gigi are up to. So I don't know where you want to start. Maybe for people that aren't familiar with one or any of you, why don't you just do a little brief intro? Andre, why don't you start?
Yes, I'm Andre. I'm the founder of the Free Madeira project, a non-profit based in Madeira Island. Lots of projects within Free Madeira, but the major one, of course, is Bitcoin Atlantis, the conference we're doing here in March next year. And yeah, that's it basically.
I'm Pablo. I'm a developer for many years. I've been working on Nostr for the most part in the past year. And as of 2 weeks, I'm based in Madeira. And yeah, tons of projects. If you've been around open source, you might see some of my stuff.
Yeah, single-handedly building out like half the Nostr ecosystem or something like that, right?
Octo Pablo, right?
Gigi?
Yeah, I'm Gigi. I used to be on Twitter a lot. Now I'm on Nostr a lot. I've been around Bitcoin for a while, and yeah, I don't know. We spoke a bunch before, so everyone who doesn't know me, go back on John's podcast and listen to some of the
There's
conversations.
5 or 6 episodes. Well, before we dive into Madeira and Bitcoin Atlantis and stuff, what's I'm pretty unplugged from things these days, not doing too many podcasts and really not following what's going on. What's the vibe like for everybody? I know there's a lot of building happening. I'm sure, Andre, you're super busy with getting things ready for the conference, and Pablo, as we just said, you're doing a lot of Nostr stuff, and Gigi, you're super busy with OpenSats. But just vibe check basically. How's everyone feeling about things these days?
All right, so I'll start because I think the vibes are really high in Madeira. So, people are coming in. Andre is doing fantastic work on building out what he's doing with Free Madeira. And, we've talked about these things before, John, that there are these little islands appearing, islands in the sense of, there's motivated and sane people, and you can buy your coffee and some other things with Bitcoin. And there's people that are actually using and building out this stuff in one geographical location. And, like in Bitcoin Jungle and of course, El Salvador and other places. And yeah, I think the goal of the whole thing is to transform Madeira into one of these places as well. And this is happening as we speak. And so, yeah, in terms of a vibe check, vibes are really high. I'm super happy that all of this is happening and I can be a small part of it and, watch this unfold at the forefront, have like a pole position seat. And now with Pablo here as well, and some of the things going on and coming to fruition that Andre already mentioned, of course, the conference in March, and also the sovereign engineering project that we are trying to do, I would say. I'm very excited about it all. So I think there's a lot of good things cooking.
Nice.
Yeah, I echo that sentiment. I think there's something special about islands with regards to freedom. I have a few theories on why that might be, but definitely Madeira checks out that feeling of sovereignty and the choice of owning your own stuff. I think there is a very interesting current of interesting movement here. And yeah, what Gigi was talking about with regards to sovereign engineering, to give a brief background, because there's still a lot of people that have no idea what that is. It's basically a 2-month program where we're inviting 21 people to come and work on whatever they want within the framework of freedom tech, leveraging Bitcoin, Nostr, the Lightning Network, building the stuff that could not be built before. So it's the first time we do this. It's extremely experimental, but yeah, it's starting in a little bit over a month. And yeah, it's super exciting. I can't wait to see what we all build together. It's gonna be pretty dope.
And it's filled up, right? So the cohort is already determined. Everyone's flying in, and the idea is just, you're going to put a bunch of heads together and try to build. Like, how's it going to work? Is everyone going to put ideas on the table and then you select a few, or are you going to split into teams and try to build? Like, what's the structure going to be like?
It's going to be extremely organic. Everybody can do whatever they want by themselves or working in teams. The idea is to leverage the synergies of the energy of everybody around and the ideas of everybody around. And you can choose and take whatever resonates with you. So the idea is that at first we'll do we'll maybe have a few talks and just get to know everybody, sort of like you can imagine like an unconference style where we're chatting and seeing what comes up, and then just allowing things to flow naturally. No structure with regards to everybody has to work on this one idea or these 4 teams. It's completely free or chaos or
right
in order.
And
yeah,
is there
Sorry, John. I think, like you said, the idea is to get the right people together, get motivated and knowledgeable people together, and kind of see what comes out of it. And I think, a lot of people are working in isolation a little bit or come from their own little bubbles. And I think it will be very worthwhile to bring a lot of them together and just do a lot of exploration and ideation. And like Pablo said, there is a lot of things that where it was just not possible to build certain stuff before. Like on the Bitcoin side, for example, we never had the concept of trustless time locks, for example. We never had the concept of collaborative custody, those kind of things. And there's similar things in the Nostr world and in the Lightning world, where the fact that we have instant cash settlement, instant finality worldwide, without the need for any credit counterparty, without the need to use credit payment rails, all those kind of things. Like, this opens up a whole new world of stuff that you can do. And I mean, we see the first inklings of this already. And I talked about this a lot in the past with, streaming payments and podcasting 2.0 and so on. That's the first exploration of what you can do now. And I hope that we will, just get the right people together and open up some minds and just really explore what can be done, and also discuss kind of what should be done. Like how do you build things in a way that from a Bitcoiner's perspective makes sense and we all want to see? Because you can also, as we've seen historically, you can take something like Bitcoin and just wrap it in a nice shitcoin package and build a casino out of it. And you can definitely build that and get really, really successful, quote unquote, in terms of really fiat rich. But should you actually build something like Coinbase or an FTX and so on Bitcoin? And I think we have to ask ourselves and try to provide answers to similar questions in the general, like in the general space that this freedom tech opens up. Because you can make the same argument on Nostr. You can, build certain things and potentially become successful. But again, I think we should learn from the mistakes that were made in the past, not only in the Bitcoin world, but also in the general world of the internet. Some things it's like what I mean is, for example, the go-to Silicon Valley model of just growing at all costs and then exiting and like not caring about what you built, not caring about your users, and just fuck them all. You made like 100 million exit and who cares, And I think the goal of freedom tech and self-sovereign technology is like that the only person that can rug pull you is yourself in some sense. And even for that, you can build in protections. Like that's not always a good thing. And you like what I want to explore in particular and have these kind of conversations, because I think, you know, everyone thinks about these things a little bit differently, is how can we build it now? How can we build it right? And kind of what should be built, and what is like maybe what would have been relevant in the old model, what would have been really appealing for like a growth at all costs, capturing all the users kind of business model, and then making a big exit and you know, moving on to the next thing. And how can we do things differently now and build something maybe that's a little bit more sustainable, a little bit more reasonable, a little bit more you know, also fair towards users and fair towards the people that built the stuff and so on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have.
To add to that, I think the old model, like the VC model, I'm gonna get hundreds of millions of users and like Gigi fuck them all. I think that model is going to die. I think that model for a couple of reasons. One of them is that model works really well within a fiat and very easy money era. That moment might not be coming back, and this having huge burn rates, and companies don't care because they can always raise some more money. That's not the case anymore, and we're seeing these type of companies hurting a little bit because of this. But even more important, I think the fact that we now have these compounding network effects, where any developer can go in and they can build anything with a social aspect to it, which is pretty much anything that is on the internet has a social component, because it improves when someone else interacts with data or with people or whatever. We didn't have that construct before. And because we now have that construct, even though it's very, very, very small, we have very few users, relatively speaking. That means that any person, any developer can come in and they can actually compete with Reddit. They can actually compete with Twitter. They can compete, like there are individual developers building stuff on Nostr that is competing with Twitter. We're very early days, and they have a huge head start with regards to network effects, momentum, capital. But it's trending in that direction. There will be a point when the compound of the network effects of individual developers working by themselves, improving the network, might flip them to put it in a gross way. If that happens, that invalidates the VC model of let's just pour millions and millions and let's just exit. It invalidates that model. So even the people that do not want to participate on this model, and they just want to continue building in the old way of raising, doing one raise and then just leveraging, that model will go away as well for them.
Yeah, I got two follow-ups from that. But first, Andre, you seem to be, is your mic, just tap your mic. I want to see if that's actually working.
It's not, this is not working correctly. I
don't think so. So either you can go to the bottom left of the Zoom screen where the little mic is and you can choose the input. But if that doesn't work, you can just move them out of the way and we can rock with your MacBook or whatever.
It's better because I did something wrong with the connection to the MacBook, I think. Oh.
Okay.
How's the sound? Sounds so bad that is
no, it's fine. It's fine. So what I was going to ask is, so you have this old model, as both of you just said, where you get as many users as you can and you throw a fence around them, and it's this like digital neo-feudalism sort of setup. And that, you know, that means two things. One is that you basically milk your users for all you can, and whether you're selling their data or whether you're just keeping them within that ecosystem and they can't leave. But also sometimes an unintended consequence of that, and oftentimes an intended consequence of that, is you can control them. And that's where the censorship creeps in, whether it's from the actual platform or from, government agency or whomever outside the platform. And so the incentives upon which that model is predicated is rife with these problems, right? For freedom and sovereignty, and then ultimately for the user experience, right? Because if the user can't easily leave an ecosystem, then the competition between ecosystems is much less than it otherwise would be when people can switch between them at will, just following the best experience. So my question for you guys is, how do you think, this new incentive structure that's being built, Bitcoin and on, the confluence of Bitcoin and Nostr, is going to change those competition dynamics, but also is going to change those monetization models? Because as you keep saying, like, sure, you build a client, let's say, and everyone loves it, but then someone else builds a better one and they just pop over to that one and stop using the old one. And so it seems like you have to retain users by just providing the best experience. But what are some of the monetization models that are emerging in terms of incentivizing developers to actually build these clients and solutions for people, whereas they can't and don't want to, in many cases, monetize in the same way that people have been in the past?
I think it's quite simple, really. I mean, the one thing that you mentioned that really stuck with me right now, which is a lot of people don't think about it in this way, but I think it's the right way to think about it, is to really think about exit cost. Like, how costly is it to leave an ecosystem? How costly is it to switch to a different thing? And in the real world, like, going to a different restaurant, like, if if your favorite restaurant gets a different cook and the food suddenly sucks, it's very easy to go to another restaurant. And so the exit cost for restaurants and just general stores like this, it's really, really low. If you're in an environment where you are forced to eat your lunch there, then obviously like the quality suffers usually. Like if you're in let's say a prison, or whatever, it's like you don't have any other choice to eat somewhere else. Yeah,
it's like you slop. It doesn't matter.
Or like you're the school canteen or whatever, like it's you have no other options, so you have to eat whatever you can. And so your exit cost of actually going somewhere else is sometimes infinitely high and sometimes just really, really high. And so we saw this emerging in the web, where the only way to monetize is by capturing users. And the best way to capture users is to build a really, really nice, very beautiful golden cage, but a really nice walled garden, as they are called. And they're called like this for a reason. So you make it really enticing to come in, and everything is for free, everything is great, like, don't be evil and all the rest of it. And monetization is an afterthought. It's like, one day we'll lock the doors to the garden, and then we're going to squeeze the ones that are not able to run away. And that's the monetization model historically online. And it really works. Like, it really works. But of course, the users suffer, the quality suffers, and so on. And you don't have real competition if this is the ecosystem that is the default and that that flourishes under these conditions. And I think the reason why it had to be this way is actually very simple, because there was no way to monetize outright. The only, like, it's really, I really do believe that not the internet not having a native currency, and the fact that the only thing you were able to use for payments is credit rails, destroyed any other possibility of another business model. Because for credit rails, inherently, you need to use KYC. You need to know your customer for credit, because credit has counterparty risk, credit has default risk, and so on. It's like you need to know who you're dealing with if you're dealing with credit rails. So you cannot even build something like, something stupid like a vending machine where you put a coin in and a Coke bottle pops out. It's impossible to do on the internet. You have to identify your customers and so on, because the only payment mechanism that was possible before Bitcoin, specifically before Lightning, was that you identify the customer, because the credit rails require KYC. The next thing is micropayments on credit rails are completely impossible. They're completely impossible. You need to find a business model where you can batch payments, where you can capture users again and batch the payments so that they pay at least like $5 or so outright. And that's why you land on the subscription model and so on and so forth, because otherwise it's completely uneconomical. You cannot charge someone 20 cents with a credit card. It doesn't work. The overhead is way too big. It just doesn't work. You have to identify them. You have to go through all these processes to charge someone like 20 cents or 5 cents or whatever. And it's uneconomical. It doesn't work. And so my thesis is basically, now that we have money proper, now that we have non-credit rails, we have actually proper payment rails, thanks to Lightning, thanks to Bitcoin, you can actually build something like a vending machine. And that's also, you know, why Pablo started working on the data vending machines on Nostr and so on. That's the idea. Like you have a vending machine is nothing like, you know, a million very small transactions. Like you put in 50 cents or whatever, and you get out a Coke bottle. And you don't need to know anything about the customer. You don't need to know anything about this interaction except for the coin landed and I can dispense the Coke bottle. And in the digital realm, online, of course, we don't have Coke bottles and so on, but we have real resources. We have real resource restrictions, and people will have to pay for those kind of things. Like you will have to pay for the Coke bottle. There is no such thing as a free lunch. You know, like if someone gives you a Coke bottle for free, then you know, it's probably up to something. You're paying one way or the other. And so I think we see this emerging already, even outside of you know, outside of the Bitcoin space with, for example, stuff like ProtonMail and just privacy-aware email providers. It's like, okay, if your email provider gives you the service for free, you're paying in some other way. Like if you're using Gmail, you're paying with your privacy, you're paying with all kinds of things. And so people are willing to just straight up pay for a good service, for a good product, and so on. And I think what Lightning in particular enables is to broaden the spectrum of services that that can use this just straight up, very honest business model of, you know, it's a great service, it's the best service, and you know, it's not, you know, it's you just outright pay for it, and you like to pay for it because you don't want your data to be harvested or, you know, whatever shady practice is used to actually pay for the thing. And so, yeah, again, I think it's really, really simple in the end. And again, back to the example from the beginning, you know, like if the way to provide the best product and the best service to the customer is to have competition, allow for competition, allow the customer to exit as well. And if you have, you know, like a city with a lot of restaurants and the customers are free to go wherever they choose, you know, usually there will be good and proper restaurants and with good and proper food, and you will also have to pay for it. And I see the same thing happening online with good and proper services, whatever they may be.
Do you think the incentive, so I get and agree with all of that, and it's very exciting, and I think that degree of competition is just going to mean that the solutions, amazing solutions, emerge like very rapidly and continue to do so and iterate and improve on themselves, which is awesome. Do you think the incentive to come into this Nostr world from the legacy world will initially be subdued because there's still this, you know, the big incentive of, oh, I start, you know, get a startup, get 10 million or 100 million customers, wrap them all up, sell them to a VC, exit, you know, and I make $100 million, where in Nostr, every sat you make is because people are, you know, choosing to send you that sat for the service that you're providing. Do you think the incentive will be less initially, or, you know, what do you think of that dynamic?
I think the change won't happen overnight, but just the fact that it's possible, and it, like, the old world and the old models and so on, I think they will still exist for a long while. I also agree with Pablo that, you know, like the happy days are probably coming to an end, like the happy days of easy money and the happy days of the traditional Silicon Valley business model and exit strategy and so on. But I actually don't care too much about the old world, so to speak. I really want to explore what the new world enables. And I think you can as a, you know, even as a solo developer, you can create 3, 4, 5 different useful services. And even if you only have like 1,000 or 10,000 users, but these users pay you in aggregate like $1 a month, like that's fine. It's like having a corner shop at the street somewhere, and you know, let a million flowers bloom. It's like I think we have to move away from you know, capture the whole market at all costs kind of
Right.
mentality. Like people are different, people like different things, people like, we see this very clearly on the Nostr side with, you know, different clients and so on and so forth. And just, you know, provide a useful service. I mean, in the open source world, the scratch your own itch mantra exists for a reason. You know, it's like you build it mostly for yourself, but the world is a big place. The internet is a big place. You'll find another 100 people at least that absolutely love what you build and had exactly the same need. And I think with Lightning and Nostr, we now have ways to find all kinds of ways to monetize this, because just the money flows very freely. And it's not credit points, you know, that's what people really don't get. It's not Chuck E. Cheese tokens. It's not like, you know, PayPal credits or whatever. It all kind of feels the same, but Lightning and Sats truly are very, very different. Like once you, again, like it completely removes the requirement for settlement. It like you have instant cash payments. It completely removes the requirement for KYC and so on. And that's just very, very different, because you can provide a service, and we see this already happening. Like VPNs are a great example. Mulvad is a great example. Like they don't need to know anything about you. They don't want to know anything about you. And I think that's also something that's currently changing. Holding user data, just like in the Bitcoin world, and Lynn Alden said this beautifully, like if you're a proper Bitcoin company, you actually don't want to hold user funds.
Mm-hmm.
So holding user funds is a liability. And I think holding user data or knowing anything about the users is also a liability, and will increasingly become a liability, because, you know, more powerful people than you will come knocking and want to have the user data and so on and so forth. So if you can build something like, again, coming back to the simple example of a vending machine, like it just sits there, people can come by and use it, drop a coin in, get a Coke. That's it. That's the business model. That's a great business model. Provide a useful service, have people pay for it, and you don't need to know anything about them. Just like, you know, you go to the corner store to buy an apple. You don't need to identify yourself. The owner doesn't need to know anything about you, and you just get the apple, you hand over the coin, and that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the interesting things that type of business unlocks is that you can explore the long tail beautifully. Like you can create something in your spare time that takes you 2 hours to create and provide it as a service, even if it gets 10 users per year. It's something that was not possible before. It's something before you needed to, like all companies are trying to go for the hockey stick growth, right? And they must go for that type of growth.
Right.
They cannot go after something that has a total addressable market of 1,000 people in the world. It's impossible. And that's why we see these conversions of everything on the internet looks kind of the same, because they cannot go for 1,000 users. They must attempt to bat for millions and millions and billions of users. They have to. The only way to survive is to go for that total addressable market. So to me, that's one of the things that absolutely excites me. The idea that you can create something and your target is just a few people and it makes economical sense. To me, that is absolutely beautiful.
It sounds like the dynamics of like economies of scale have dramatically changed, right? Because as you're saying, like economies of, it could be one, right? You make something like the vending machine, right? Someone pays you, you give them something. You're not pushed out into this weird domain that you were just describing of you have to get 10 million users for this to actually work or make sense. It can make sense with one user. And it seems like it's because it's that direct relationship of one user, one payment that's now enabled that way, which is, you know, super interesting. But you know, one of the things that seems like a contradiction that I think will become more and more obvious, and Gigi mentioned it, like something like Proton Mail, right? Encrypted email, private, all this stuff, but most people pay with their credit card to get it, right? So how private is it really? Push comes to shove. Like let's say legislation changes in Switzerland, you know, or wherever they have servers and stuff. Well, then you're back to square one. And I think as these solutions emerge, it's going to become pretty obvious that there's a glaring hole in all of these, you know, so-called privacy services that have emerged in the old model, because you're attached to it in some way. They're just basically saying, you know, trust us, bro, we won't share that information. But it, of course, it raises the question, you know, in Bitcoin, we have this saying, right? Like first, or it's not from Bitcoin, but it's applied to Bitcoin. First, they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win, something like that. I mean, the whole premise of Nostr is basically freedom on the internet, let's say. And freedom either scares or is opposed to the, the control mechanisms that have been put in place by whomever, corporations, governments, all that kind of stuff. And so at a certain point, you would think that people would, the powers that be, the they out there, whoever they are, would say, hey, there's a bunch of these people on the internet, like completely circumventing our mechanisms. They're transacting, peer-to-peer. They're operating social networks. They're building pretty much a new internet that we can't control. And that's really not good for us, or we're opposed to that. I'll tack on to this question, and it's the technicalities are beyond me, so you guys can address it better. But I think it was, Peter Todd recently, yesterday and perhaps before, but I only saw it in kind of preparation for this, was basically questioning or saying that, Nostr is not truly decentralized. So, you can address that. But my point is just being like at a point when this lands on the radar of the powers that be, what do you think will be the outcome then? Is it stoppable? Is it, can they do anything about this? Or is this like a Cambrian explosion of freedom solutions, emerging in the world that can't be stopped effectively?
Who wants to go first?
I'll mention the Peter Todd thing. Peter has very different ideas. He wants to put Nostr on the blockchain, basically. I mean, he literally said that, which it's very confusing because it makes very little sense. So yeah, I heavily I disagree with that a lot. Yeah, the censorship resistant properties of Nostr have not been tested, right? This is like Bitcoin way before the block size wars, where theoretically miners could not collude and change Bitcoin. Hopefully not. And then we went through the war and we noticed that they had absolute no power over changing the rules. Nostr is in a similar state where it has not been tested. There is still a lot of work that needs to be done in order to hide the Nostr traffic in a more opaque way. But the beauty of Nostr, or with regards to the censorship resistance part of Nostr, is the fact that you can so easily move from place A to place B, pretty much without even noticing that you're moving. At the beginning of the year, NVK famously used to run the Bitcoin hackers Mastodon server, and he also ran the BRB Nostr relay. Both of them shut down, and the result was extremely different. The Bitcoin hackers instance, the Mastodon instance, people were complaining on Twitter, how can you do this to us, and you're censoring us, and you took our data, and blah, blah. And in Nostr, most people didn't even realize that something had happened. One of the most popular relays went down, and no one noticed. Only developers that are looking at the logs are noticing these things. So that property of being so resilient that, like the Bitcoin network, when China banned mining and the Bitcoin network slowed down a little bit, nothing happened really, and it was the biggest state attacking the biggest concentration of hash power, and nothing happened. I think Nostr has similar properties. We still need to see how resilient it is to an upfront attack, but I think we have really good building blocks.
Yeah, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. I think it is about the building blocks and basically the very simple principle that Nostr is built on, and Bitcoin too as well. So Nostr makes use of the nature of information, and information is very easy to spread and hard to stifle. And neither Nostr nor Bitcoin are perfect. So I think we all know the limitations of Bitcoin. I think everyone should know by now that Bitcoin makes certain trade-offs, and it's trade-offs all the way down. So the perfect solution never exists in engineering. It's just the perfect solution for what? For Bitcoin, it's 21 million set in stone. Basically, it's like everything is geared towards keeping the integrity of the monetary policy. That's how I would say it. That's why I sometimes phrase it that the soul of Bitcoin is 21 million, because everything is geared towards keeping that intact. And the trade-off is everything else, like we don't have unlimited block space. We don't have, like it's very hard to keep a global synchronous state of anything. And so you have to make certain trade-offs. Nostr is very, very different because Nostr doesn't need the global synchronous state. It has similar building blocks in some sense, like cryptographically speaking, but like Pablo alluded to, it is different from other decentralized social media things that have tried before. And I'm even hesitant to call Nostr decentralized social media, because that's kind of, to me, it's more like self-sovereign identity in some sense, and kind of it offers the right building blocks to, like you said, John, before, to build a new internet that's way harder to stop, way harder to censor, and has native identity baked in. Identity was always something that was missing from the internet. So you had to have an authority that gives you your identity. That's why you're identified by your Twitter handle or by your, whatever handle. It's like your Facebook identity or your Gmail email thingy or whatever. And Nostr has cryptographic identities baked in, and you have your Nostr identity, and you might have multiple, and they are not connected to your real life identity unless you want them to, and so on. And so I think that's the right building block. And the censorship resistant part, like Pablo said, I think there's still a lot of technical work to be done. Like, for example, Nostr has DMs as well. If you have anything critical to send to someone, don't use Nostr DMs. Like, Nostr DMs are not very private yet, and there's a lot of data leakage because, again, like, it makes use of the fact that information is very easy to spread and hard to stifle. So information is spread all over the place, and you can tell like who is DMing whom and so on Nostr. But we saw already like really big relays going down, like Pablo said, and very recently the Damus relay was also nuked by Will, and like nothing happened. It's like most people didn't really notice. And so I think we are in a really good spot on the Nostr side in terms of it. Like Fiat Jeff described it, it's simple enough that it can actually work. Like, it has a chance of working. It's the first time we have a decentralized social media that has a chance of working. And I think the most beautiful thing is that you are truly in charge of your own identity, and you can also do everything yourself without becoming the new king of whatever instance you're running, like it was with Mastodon and so on. So it is a very different approach, and I think it has all the right ingredients to really rebuild parts of the internet in a more sane, more freedom-oriented, more self-sovereign way. And in terms of stopping it, and in terms of the powers that be kind of trying to interfere with it, we will see how this will play out. But I see it in a similar way as I see it with Bitcoin. The only winning move is to play. So you'll have to join eventually. And so with Bitcoin, we see this very clearly. Like, we see it now also on a nation state level and so on. We see it on a public company level and so on. If you don't have Bitcoin on your balance sheet, you're just like, it's way better and way easier to just put Bitcoin on your balance sheet and join the Bitcoin network than to try to fight Bitcoin. And I think with Nostr it will be similar. It's and we saw this before. It's just the better, more open, more resilient system. And the last time a better, more open, more resilient system replaced another one is when we switched from print and newspapers and so on to the internet. And you can, like, try to fight the internet and keep your little newspaper alive and so on. But it's way, way better you just join and you just become another blog and and go with the times. And I think this will be how it will play out with Nostr as well.
Do you think one of the stumbling blocks for adoption generally, which is somewhat similar to Bitcoin, because you never stop hearing people make the case that not everyone's going to be able to secure a set of information, let's say 12 words in Bitcoin, and that's a hurdle. Do you think it'll be something similar in Nostr, because so many people become so used to being able to get bailed out by password retrieval or whatever, and now we're in a landscape where you have a much greater responsibility to preserve the integrity of your own data? Is that the major stumbling block for adoption?
No, the major stumbling block currently is a different one, and I'm gonna repeat what I said a couple days ago to Pablo. It's like, because people are, you know, scratching their heads. Why is it that no one, you know, is joining Nostr anymore? Basically, like, there was a large influx, and it kind of stopped. And, you know, maybe there aren't enough tutorial videos, and maybe, you know, like you mentioned, handling the private keys is too much and so on. I completely disagree. It's just, you know, there's only Bitcoiners on Nostr, basically, more or less. All the chatter is about Bitcoin, and so if you're not interested in Bitcoin, it's really hard to join and stay. And the example I gave to Pablo just a couple of days ago is like, you know, it's like you're going to a gay bar, but you yourself are not gay. Like, how much of a good time are you gonna have? It's like, how long are you gonna stick around? It's just it's for a certain set of people, and that's perfectly okay. That's perfectly fine. And I think it will be like this for a little bit. And Jack mentioned this as well, that all these communities, they had like all these networks, they had a certain group of people as a seed. You know, Twitter had you know, San Francisco journalist type people, basically, and you know, like the tech sphere was big. Reddit also had a very certain internet subculture when it started off, and so on. And I think that's fine. In terms of handling private key material, I think it will be very similar to how it's handled now with more modern Bitcoin wallets. You don't necessarily handle the seed material like insanely directly. Like for certain use cases, it's perfectly acceptable to have an encrypted backup stored in the cloud and so on. If it's your life savings, it's a very different story. But for like a spending wallet, you know, like that's fine. And I think for Nostr as well, we see this already with the legacy social media sites with Facebook and so on. It's like social recovery is used a lot, and it actually works. And I'm a fan of it. A lot of Nostr people kind of hate it and hate the idea. I really like it. So sorry to everyone who's listening, but you'll you'll hear me talk about social recovery a lot, because I think in the end you will always have this problem if you rely on purely on a key to identify yourself completely. Like, if you lose the key, you have to start from scratch. And if your key gets stolen, it's very hard. Like, if your key gets stolen, you'll have to prove somehow that this is not you anymore. It's like, it's a really, really, really hard problem. And you can't solve it with keys all the way down. You know, like, you'll have a master key that derives all the other keys that you actually use. Okay, what if your master key gets stolen? And so on. And like you said, like, people are really bad with handling key material, but people are really good with, you know, reaching out to their 5 closest friends in another way and convincing their 5 closest friends of like, hey, this is actually me, my key got stolen or I lost it and so on. Can you reinstantiate my account by just doing this and that and clicking around here? And if 5 people agree that, you know, this is the new Pablo, then this is the new Pablo. And this is how I see it play out, because we see this is already in effect in Facebook and other platforms where you just you know, fall back to social recovery, and this really works and is easy for people.
Yeah, I wrote a specification called NIP41, which handles how to signal that you are moving to a different key in a pretty good way within all these constraints. And the use case, like the user experience that I have in mind, heavily relies on the social signaling, because the basic way it works is you anchor to Bitcoin an event saying my next key will be this other key, and if your key gets compromised, you can prove that at some point in the past you wanted to migrate to this other key. But the way I see it actually working is that when people would say, for example, I publish an event saying my key got compromised and I will move to this key that I whitelisted as my next key 2 years ago, that maybe I'll call Gigi and say, hey, this is real. I got my key stolen or leaked or whatever, and I'm moving to this key. And Gigi can put the weight of his our relationship behind this migration event. To me, when I saw that a company like Facebook relies on social recovery was very interesting, because it, like, Facebook is fully custodial, right? Like, you cannot move your identity. It's a password that you can recover. So they have, like, they don't need to compromise. They own your account. They can do whatever they want with the account. Yet at their scale, the only thing that works is social recovery, which is super interesting. It's very, very interesting that even though they can do whatever they want with your account, they need to rely on social recovery to give your account back.
We could talk about Nostr forever, but there are some other things I want to discuss. But one last thing with Nostr, I mean, when the capacity to circumvent controls of any kind, when the ability to say no typically emerges, there's usually, you know, at the top of the line are the people doing stuff you're not allowed or supposed to be doing, right? So it's all fine and dandy to do a new Twitter on Nostr, and that's novel because, you know, of all the censorship that's been going on in legacy social media over the last few years. But like, also, if you really can do things online and circumvent controls, you know, usually porn and illegal stuff is like right up at the top of the list, right? To leverage these new technologies. So, you know, Pablo, you're probably the closest to all this. I mean, I'm not asking you to out or incriminate anybody, but like, are dark markets emerging on Nostr? Are, you know, like what's happening in that space to really, you know, kind of in a sense test its ability?
There's a lot of porn, I can tell you that much.
And not all of it published by Gigi, by the way. Yeah, actually, so a couple of days ago, Kieran, the guy behind Snort and Substream, he launched a very bare bones Pirate Bay style torrent client, which just uses Nostr. So it relies on relays to disseminate the information about the torrents. It was, I think it was like 2 days ago that he published it. But it's something that makes a lot of sense for Nostr. And we see all the work that Pirate Bay has done to stay alive, even within, I think they're based in Sweden, and they have exchanged some very funny emails with the people from the licensing world and whatnot. But even within that world, they have struggled so much, and they have had to do so much work just to stay alive, moving locations and changing name servers and changing registrars and all these things and having the site go down. But because the one that Kieran launched is based on Nostr, it's basically very, very, very hard to stop, because I can run it locally, just like Bisq. So in the same way that Bisq works, I can run the UI just locally and connect to any kind of relay to get the torrent information. So definitely there are. I'm actually working also on something related to, like, you could say porn, I guess. It's just it's just porn is one type of content. Not for Marty Bent. He will be banned. But yeah, I think these things are going to make a lot of sense, and they are being built, or they will be built.
And in that case, like, let's call them dark markets, and everyone automatically thinks of drugs, right? But really, it's just an open market like Silk Road, where you can get whatever you want. It just so happens that a lot of people want drugs, right? Or things that you're usually not able to get. But in such a case, I mean, what would the approach of enforcement be? Would they go after relays to the extent they can? Would they try to identify the relays and say, hey, you facilitated this, so you're in trouble?
Yeah. So I think relays are the ones that are on the hook for this kind of data, because a client is like a browser, right? You can display in a browser whatever you want, and you cannot hold Mozilla accountable for, oh, you've displayed child pornography. It just cannot. It just does not work like that. But relays are the ones holding the data. So yeah, definitely it's up to the relays to circumvent the local restrictions.
It's a really tricky question, kind of, because you really have to get down to the nitty-gritty of what are we talking about, where is the data stored, and so on. Like the torrent thing that was just mentioned, the Pirate Bay is also, it's just an indexer, so it just points to other torrents, and the file transfer happens peer-to-peer via torrent clients. And the data is not, like the movies or whatever are not stored on the Pirate Bay. They just aren't. And that's the same is usually true in the Nostr world. Relays, they do hold data, but they hold it. They usually don't hold a lot of data. Like in Nostr, usually images and videos and other things are hosted in other places. And so the enforcement game turns into a game of whack-a-mole. If you think a file is illegal and you want to remove it from the internet, you have to go after the servers that actually serve the file. And what Pirate Bay, for example, landed on is just like they switch servers like every day, basically. And it's just like they have a million different URLs, and it's very easy to spin it up. So it's very similar to the model that Nostr uses by default. Like it's very, very easy to spin up a new relay and serve whatever data you want to serve. And it's trivial for clients. It's the default for clients to fetch stuff and post stuff to multiple relays. And that's why the exit cost on Nostr is like 0. Like you don't even notice if one of the relays goes down. It's like it's very much like you don't notice if one of the Bitcoin nodes goes down. It's just like it's it's blasted everywhere and everyone holds the same data. In Nostr, it's a bit different. Like not everyone holds the same data, not at all. But you fetch stuff from many multiple sources, and you also broadcast stuff to multiple sources. And so rebuilding something like the Pirate Bay on Nostr makes a lot of sense. It's basically the same model. It's just more streamlined, easier to do, and on a protocol level. And for law enforcement, again, it depends always on the jurisdiction, what is deemed illegal and what not, and you will have to do actual legwork, actual police work to shut down the servers where if they are in your jurisdiction, to remove the stuff that you don't like. But I think this will, we already see this. This is increasingly hard if you don't know where the stuff is hosted in the first place, and if stuff is end-to-end encrypted, it's very hard to even make a judgment call of what is the nature of the data and those kind of things.
Right.
So yeah, I would say we'll see how this plays out. I'm not too worried about this because in general, also for torrents, it's very unfortunate that most people think they hear torrents and they think illegal, because torrents are anything but illegal. Torrents are very, very useful. Like Linux distributions use torrents as the default for large file downloads, those kind of things. There's a lot of, like, I use torrents all the time, and I rarely use them for anything that's deemed illegal in some jurisdiction. It's an awesome protocol to share large files, and I think in general, also the stuff that we see on Nostr now, it's just regular stuff. It's not people are most people are normal, and with the 1% of psychopaths that do whatever, like you always have to find a way to deal with them. You cannot deal with them at the expense of the other 99%, and you'll actually have to do traditional police work and the legwork to deal with those people. That's kind of my take.
Well, that's what's so fascinating. I mean, Gigi, you and I have talked about this at length many times, but now Nostr adds another, angle or level to this, which is the social, psychological change that these open systems will necessitate almost, right? Because before it was like prison level enforcement. Don't do that, or we're taking something away from you, or we're putting you somewhere, or we're hurting you in some way, right? And that has generally been how society has determined, things are kept within the framework of whomever decides such things, right? And obviously, all of us on this call would probably identify several aspects of our current social circumstance that we disagree with, that we have been limited in ways, and we haven't been able to express ourselves, or lack of sovereignty or whatever. And these protocols are dissolving a lot of those things. And so for a lot of people, it's going to be very scary, right? Because those typical restrictive structures that have been in place to quote unquote stop the bad guys will be removed. And then the question remains, well, like, then how do you stop the bad guys? And yes, there will, be a ton of different mechanisms to try to do that, both in this new sovereign world, and there'll be a reflexive response in the legacy world. But I do also think it's going to necessitate that we do many things, but for lack of a better term, place more emphasis on morality generally. Like those discussions will have to become more elevated, and they will have to be more socially enforced in the culture between individuals, within organizations, and that kind of stuff, in order to negate some of the real negative effect of unbridled freedom, let's say. And I think that's great. I think that's a very good thing, because the inverse of that, which perhaps has been the state that's prevailed for so long, is that those conversations haven't been happening because everyone has been so restricted or controlled by some authority outside of themselves. And so you have, a society generally who doesn't talk as much about these moral issues as they ought to, because basically they're not in charge of them, right? They're not the one who decides such things. And they just, and that's why you get this kind of notion of zombie or sheeple that, goes around these days, because people give up the responsibility to engage in such things because, on one level, of course, I anytime people give up responsibility, I'm critical of that, but you can understand it on a level because it's kind of been taken from them in a sense. But now that, these such seismic shifts in the structure of social interaction are happening, I think it's going to necessitate that those conversations are elevated, and that the emphasis is placed back on every individual's responsibility and requirement to think about these things more deeply. So how do I mitigate some of the negative downsides of this opening up by my own behavior and by my own interactions and by my own expectations of the people that I'm interacting with?
Yeah, I think expectations are like a good way to think about this and how I see this emerging. I mean, Nostr, make no mistake, Nostr is like ridiculously small still. Like, I think most of the subreddits are bigger than Nostr. It's 200 people basically. I don't know. It's very, very, very small. It's all of Pablo's clones and VHF and some other people. But what again, back to the building blocks, Nostr provides the right building blocks to rebuild a lot of the things that we saw on the internet in a more proper, less restrictive way. And what I'm actually excited about is the various communities that are already emerging on top of Nostr, and also kind of the various clients that are that have certain restrictions and that have community moderation and those kind of things, because that's the way how humans have always worked. Like, identity is very much prismatic. You are not one person. You are a different person when you go to church than when you go to the strip club or whatever. You're a different person at work than when you are with your buddies at the sport club or what have you. And so you have all these social cues on how to behave and what is okay and what is expected and so on. And again, back to the expectations. And we see this online as well. Like, the way people behave on 4chan is very, very different than the way people behave on LinkedIn. I mean, for some people, that's not true. But generally speaking, there are different expectations on different platforms. And we have all these different subcultures and sub-communities and so on. And I think the same thing will emerge very naturally on Nostr. And it is about the question of who actually has the power to silence someone else, and who has the power to, curate information and so on. And in Nostr, generally, the power is given to the users themselves, or to smaller communities. And I think the just like in any type of governments, I think the smaller it is, the better it is for self-expression and for freedom and so on and so forth. And that's where I see it going. Like, you will have these various sub-experiences, so to speak, like these very different experiences, but you're still using Nostr as the base layer and as the protocol. Just like you have very different experiences online today, but you're still using the internet. You're still using TCP/IP and HTTP and whatnot. And I think it's just, the shift, like, it's currently, it's not obvious how it is better, But as the pain of the legacy system increases, it will become more obvious of how it is better. Just like currently for many people still, it's not obvious how Bitcoin is better. But if you ever got debanked for, you know, like honking too loudly or whatever, you immediately know why Bitcoin is better. And for everyone who was put into Twitter jail many times or got deplatformed and so on, it's immediately obvious why Nostr is better. And so I think it will just take some time to play out, but both the freedom aspect will become more obvious, and also I think moderation and kind of community expectations and those kind of things that we know from the current platforms will also emerge in a slightly different way, but still they will emerge, I think.
Yeah. Let's do a segue here. So I think part of the impact of these digital freedom landscapes emerging, and also the capacity for them, or the result of them emerging, is, you know, people finding each other, right? Like-minded people finding each other, like we all have, and like, you know, everyone in the Bitcoin community has, is that the weight of the economic weight, the ideological weight of that occurrence is trying to find homes in meat space, right? Because it's all well and good to have digital freedom, but that's only one aspect of our lives, right? We all have to eat and hang out and live, at least currently. We'll see what the future holds. But and so people are looking for places where the freedom that they can establish online in the digital world can be, you know, there's a commensurate freedom in meat space world. Maybe it's not equal, but at least, you know, where people are searching for that as well. And Madeira has recently popped up as, you know, one of those potentials. It's a small island off the coast of, or maybe two small islands off the coast of Morocco. Andre, you could probably explain it better than me, and I know we touched on it briefly, but my impression is that it's this place that there's a brewing kind of Bitcoin community there. There's been some support from the local government. Some people will think that's good. Some people will think it's bad. Some people will think it's irrelevant. But I think a lot of us, especially in the post-COVID era, are open, either actively looking or open to the idea of moving to a place where we can have a better lifestyle, where there's more freedom, where there's more like-minded people around, where Bitcoin is more prevalent and can be used more easily, all of that kind of stuff. And it seems like Madeira is emerging as one of those places. So I spoke to Gigi yesterday. Pablo and Gigi have both recently moved there. And there's going to be a big influx of people coming from the conference, and coming for the conference. And I suspect a lot of those people are going to be kind of checking it out as a potential place to either, you know, buy property or move, you know, buy a vacation property or move full time. So, you know, what's the current status in Madeira as an emerging sovereign citadel, let's say?
We're asking for independence next week. No, I'm just.
Damn it! I wish that was true.
No, but it's all you said. So the main goal, actually, if you choose one, there's many goals to free Madeira, but if you had to choose one, it's exactly that. So we're trying to establish a bottoms-up community here. You know, we can't be, you know, maybe on our way to freedom in a way, but we're still part of the mainland Portuguese government and part of the EU. So there's a lot of trade-offs on our jurisdiction as well, but has the same way I think about legal tender, you know, laws in El Salvador, for example, that I don't think they were the right approach by a top-down perspective. I think the same way on this. And I think if you can get the community running, the numbers running, you know, a lot of people joining the community, I think we can, you know, maybe approach it on a bottoms-up way. And who knows, in the future we will declare independence from the mainland.
Is there any like fervor for that in Madeira? Like, has there been any cultural aspect of that ever?
No, there was a famous, you know, before, for foreigners, this date doesn't say anything, but 1974 was the revolution in Portugal, the Republican Revolution. And before that in Madeira, there was this organization called Flama, it was actually like a small do we say ETA in Barcelona? The the independence movement in Barcelona. What?
Okay.
In the Basque country.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there was a small thing like that here for the Madeira independence. Blowing up cars.
Really?
Oh yeah. There's a total history on that, and there were a few fervent actors in Madeira that really were pushing for Madeira to be an independent state, basically. So maybe we can do that in the future as well, without blowing up the cars. You say
in cyberspace.
yes. We'll go Ethereum way and just do it on the metaverse, But I think we can do it. A lot of people call Bitcoin the peaceful revolution. So maybe, who knows, we can do something similar on Midspace.
Well, that would be very cool. I mean, it seems like this kind of fracturing and balkanization is going to continue happening over the next several decades as, the largesse and the weight of these massive governments just is incapable of sustaining themselves, basically, whether it's from debt burdens or just, managing complexity and that kind of stuff. So you never know, because like an island nation sounds a little more sexy than a protectorate or jurisdiction or whatever Madeira status is. But in any case, it sounds very nice. Gigi was giving me a bit of the rundown yesterday, just in terms of climate, food, population, amenities, services, cost of living, all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, what's your, before we get into the conference, what's typically your kind of highlights of Madeira that you talk to people about that are prospectively looking into either visiting or moving there?
Well, actually, I had a conversation this morning that I remembered a very good example. And a lot of people care about the weather, right? The weather is part of the quality of life, I guess. So Madeira on that is on the top of the world.
And what's it like, average 25, not too hot, not too humid sort of thing?
Exactly, because it's very temperate all over the year. It doesn't get too hot, doesn't get too cold. The funny story was this real story about a wealthy guy, a few years ago, that at one point decided, I want to live in the most temperate part of the world and the most comfortable part of the world. And for that, he was a very scientific guy, so he started researching all the weather data around the world. And he figured out the best, the most reliable sensors were the airport sensors. So he collected all the airport sensors around the world, and he ended up with Madeira. So that I think that's full explanatory about the weather we have here.
Right.
So that's part of it. But overall, there's a lot going on for the quality of life overall, in the infrastructure, nature, relation, multicultural at the same time. It's not that small that you still have the restaurants, the night out, it's very touristic for a long time. So there's a lot of expats living here. So it's multicultural, cosmopolitan in a way, but without being overwhelming. It's
English everywhere.
English everywhere. So it's basically a good place to live. It's safe overall. We cannot complain.
The population of Funchal is like, I think Gigi said yesterday, 130, 150,000, something like that.
Yes, in Madeira it's like 250, around 250, 260, and half of that lives in the main city.
Right, that's a nice size.
Well, there's a lot more Madeirans outside, actually, on the diaspora. It's on the millions, actually.
Isn't there's someone super famous that's from Madeira, or maybe it's
Cristiano Ronaldo, probably.
Yeah, he's from Madeira, right?
Yeah, the only reason Portugal doesn't give us independence, they need the guy for the national team.
All right, tell me, and actually before we go on to the conference, Pablo, I don't want to out where you were previously, but last time we spoke, you were somewhere else.
Yeah, in Kalymnos in Greece.
Right, and it sounded pretty sweet there. So what caused you to make the move from one beautiful island to another?
Well, Kalymnos doesn't have great weather, so it has a rainy season, and that's why we have such fantastic climbing there, is because it rains a lot during the winter. So all winters I must leave. And yeah, we decided to come here at this stage for our family. A place like Madeira is much better for the development of my family, let's say. And we were in Madeira in March, I think, or April this year, and we absolutely loved it. The place is very weird because you have like city summer life, like super nice weather, and just long short no sleeves shirt, just on shorts, and then you drive 15 minutes, and it's like you're in Norway. In the middle of the forest, within the fog. It's
because you go straight up, basically.
Because you go straight up,
Right.
straight up. And it's so weird having such like when we were here in March or April, we would leave the house and take our shorts on our down jacket. You need everything in between as well.
It's actually the first tip that my wife gives to everyone who comes from the outside. You know, you're all good. Just put your swimwear and your winter jacket in the car. You
know. So yeah, we came and we absolutely loved it. And yeah, we've been here for like 2 weeks, and yeah, everybody in the family is enjoying it so much.
Oh,
so,
you've only been there 2 weeks.
Yeah.
You've been there longer. Okay. But you're planning on staying for a while.
Yeah, so at least for the next year, we'll be staying here.
Cool. All right, Andre, tell me about the conference, how it came to be, what the kind of approach is. I mean, from a quasi outside perspective, I mean, it seems like it's going to be a pretty unique conference. It seems like you're trying to really think about the things that have been lacking in other conferences, and also the things that appeal to, you know, let's say the Bitcoin maximalist crowd, for lack of a better term, outside of just what's happening in Bitcoin technologically or economically, but kind of broadening the scope of other things that a lot of Bitcoiners tend to care about. So what was the motivation behind the conference, and tell me a bit more about it?
So that was, yeah, that was one of the goals, actually, because you know, when it started, and I have to go to the beginning, you know, when I pitched the idea of doing a conference here to the advisory board, it was just in my head, it was something way smaller. I was thinking about, you know, bringing the advisory board here, or maybe a few other guys, and just do something smaller that we could mainly, you know, attract the locals, the curious minds that of Funchal, but also invite government officials, you know, public entities, you know, the power company, you know, people that we wanted basically to start a relationship with in terms of, you know, the education and how this technology can be important for us. But because we have this amazing advisory board, things quickly escalated, and suddenly we had you know, big names like Jack Dorsey and Michael Saylor and, you know, Jack Mallers is confirmed to come. And at one point I just gave up and I said, you know, fuck this, you know, we need to go big. And when I decided to go big, I want to do it properly. So we thought about, well, not everything, but the most we can, you know, to make it an excellent week. I would say not only a conference, there's a lot of satellite events going on that week. We immediately thought of doing sort of a vacation slash conference kind of week, not only the conference for only the Bitcoiners. So we wanted to attract the families, the wives, the kids, you know, everyone to come. And yeah, and that was part of the design since the beginning, I guess. And that's why we also have so many things going on, from family-oriented activities to nature-oriented activities, and some not even related to Bitcoin at all. Just, you know, vacation activities basically for the family, also to enjoy, and the kids and the wives and everything else.
Well, you could say that an element of Bitcoin is just good, strong, healthy living, you know, and it seems like there's some of those satellite events are going to be about that. How many people are you expecting?
Well, we're aiming for 5,000 people since the beginning. I think we're going to reach, if not that number, very close. Ticket sales are going well. We're still 3 months away from the conference. There's a lot of interest and buzz, and, you know, a lot of people are talking about it. You know, earlier you were talking about people interested in visiting. That's already happening a lot. You know, not only people that are coming for the conference for the first time, with also an eye in Madeira for other reasons, but it's been happening. Just last week, here at the co-work space, you know, Joanna, the reception girl, called me, hi, Andrea, someone's there at the door, you know, calling for you. And I was like, I went to the door, and there was this couple of Americans from Seattle, just straight from the airport to meet me here at co-work. You know, basically they wanted to meet me, say, oh, great, you know, congratulate me on the project. Madeira is amazing. We never heard about Madeira before this. And you have to tell the president that people like me are coming here to
How did they know about you? They saw you on a podcast or something?
Probably, yeah, I guess. They saw the initial videos and some podcasts, maybe covers that.
Your OnlyFans, maybe.
Yeah. My Nostr OnlyFans porn thing. I said like, but it, the word is spreading.
Yeah. What's the status? I know that I think Portugal just recently rescinded or ended the real estate investment program, maybe because, you know, it was too popular. And now you have to invest in like an investment fund, $500,000, I think, in order to get that, you know, fast track residency or something like that. What's the status of all that? Do you know?
It depends. It's not that straightforward, you know, bureaucracy and red tape, and, you know, it's always complicated, but they did remove the possibility of buying a property directly, you know, out straight for the nationality, in part because, well, it didn't make sense at all. It doesn't make sense at all to cut that part because of the housing, but that's how politics go. You know, they were being pressured by the left-wing parties. You know, the housing prices were coming through the roof, and they have to blame and, you know, find scapegoats. Not related at all, because if you see the numbers and the real numbers on the thing, it's not the problem at all.
Sure.
But well, it's the narratives, you know, vacation rental markets were also blamed for a lot of stuff. You know, the wealthy guys that are, you know, stealing our properties are, you know, another reason. So they had to find their scapegoats.
It's almost as if they had printed trillions and trillions of dollars.
Oh,
I don't know. I've read something online.
It might have something to do with it. But, you know, they don't, you know, it goes, and it's the same thing in Portugal. Actually, the last government, because they actually fell down last week, the national government is Euro-socialism, as the rest of Europe, basically. Although it's turning now to other factions, and they are pretty scared now of the far right now, like, because, of course, nothing related to their policies so far. But so we suffer the same destiny as, I guess, all other EU nations. We are a bit more self-sovereign because of the reasons that I said. We have our own government, we have our own parliament. We are a semi-autonomous region of Portugal, but we are still limited on our power, especially the big ones like tax and nationality and so on.
Yeah. Is it possible? Because I looked into it a bit, and so now, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's all these funds you can invest in: farming, real estate, like whatever. And these funds, presumably you put in, I think, $500,000 or whatever the amount is, and then you can get your residency / citizenship. But I was, you know, purely selfishly thinking about it. I'm like, well, I don't want to invest in any of those funds. But if one of those funds was just Bitcoin, maybe at some point I would think about it, right? If I could just, because I don't want to park that kind of money in whatever, anything other than Bitcoin, basically. But if you started one of those funds that were part of that program, then, you know, maybe it's more palatable.
That we may have some news for you shortly, but the thing is, it's not that straightforward, and it's not only funds. You can invest in limited companies without being, you know, fund investment.
Oh, okay.
So, for example, we were just speaking with another maxi Bitcoiner, Svetsky, the other day, because he was also considering that, and we were talking about the different possibilities. There's a path to residency and nationality besides the, you know, capital investment. There's also NHR programs and nomad programs and so on that are quite cheaper, but also, you know, usually more bureaucratic and a lot of paperwork involved. But also in direct investment, the funds, the you know, business allocation, you can invest in, you know, in research. There's some other vehicles that are still around. And yeah, we are designing something interesting that I cannot talk about until there's a full green light on those, but it will be allow for something that you're close to what you were saying.
Awesome. And is the amount 500,000? Do I have that right?
Yes.
So even if it's in a company or if it's in one of these funds, it's the same amount.
Yes.
Cool. So I didn't realize that. So it's not just any company or any company. If you invest that's a certain amount in
there's different rules to each case, but for example, if you let's say you created your own company here, right? You could do that. You could incorporate a company here, invest 500K of your own capital in your own company. But then there's other rules attached. You need to create 5 jobs, and there's some other restrictions that you have to do. Or you can also invest 500K in an existing company, for example, and that already has 5 jobs created. And but it depends on the different equations.
That holds exclusively
basically
Bitcoin on their balance sheet.
It depends on the on each individual. So
Right.
There's consulting and all of that needed in the middle because every situation is different. But there's a lot of options still.
And what, you're probably the go-to person for inquiries about Madeira and all that kind of stuff. I mean, what's the interest like? You mentioned that couple that came, they just showed up and asked about the presidents and stuff, but are there a lot of people looking at Madeira, a lot of Bitcoiners, let's say, looking at Madeira for the reasons we've been discussing?
Absolutely. It's been surprising to me the number of people that reached out, and a lot of them inquire about that. So I'm considering coming. I want to visit, to test it out. It's been, I lost count now. And a few are already living here. And when I mean a few, I mean on the tens at least, 10, 20, 30 people already. But there's more coming for sure because we see it on the Telegram groups, on emails, on calls, and everyone. A lot of interest now.
And I know this is one of your things you're working on, and Gigi told me a little bit about it yesterday, but how easy is it to pay with Bitcoin, or how prevalent is acceptance of Bitcoin? Because I think, one of your maybe objectives, and I think it's a very good one, is to increase the amount of people locally who accept Bitcoin, because, I'm sure some will disagree with this, but I think a lot of Bitcoiners actually would like to spend Bitcoin, in their daily life if possible. But obviously the opportunity to do so is limited at the moment.
I wasn't very focused on that when we launched the initiative because I didn't want to, in the beginning, the community was still a minority. So I didn't want to put a lot of merchants online if they were not going to see any payments, regularly. So I think it's a thing that needs to go hand in hand, the market and the supply or the demand. But now, of course, since a few months ago, we started really pushing for it because of the community growing and the conference that's happening now. I've been thinking about the conference a lot, as you can imagine. But if we do get 5,000 people at the same week in Funchal, you have to see the size of Funchal, the city. It's going to be, Bitcoiners everywhere, literally. And so we increased our push a lot. And actually, our first official hire for the company was Charlie. Charlie has, by the way, a very authentic personal story with Bitcoin because he's from Venezuela, so one of our largest communities. And he escaped Venezuela with Bitcoin in his head with his mother to Madeira, which is
awesome.
A very good story. And he's our first official employee of Free Madeira. I call him the merchant rabbit now. He goes all over town, orange pilling and teaching the merchants on how to accept and supporting them. And so far it's been crazy. Now we're going ballistic. We're in our own bull run of merchants here in Funchal. And to my surprise, the acceptance has been crazy good. Basically everyone is interested. Everyone's accepting to start accepting Bitcoin payments. They've been very nice to Charlie. Charlie is already very rotated, so I think we're going to have some really good numbers by the conference time.
Amazing, amazing.
It has happened multiple times where I go to a shop and I just see a sign Bitcoin accepted here, but I didn't go to the shop because of BTC map or anything like that. It just happened to coincidence.
Right.
But yeah, on the way here, we're at his cowork now, and on the way here, I buy a coffee with Bitcoin every single day. I go and have lunch, pay with Bitcoin. I have breakfast when I have breakfast with Bitcoin. It's the pharmacy, like a bunch of pharmacies.
Yeah, and soon we'll have the biggest, one of the oldest companies of Madeira, and one of the biggest ones, which is the brewery, and they do the juices and everything. They're gonna start accepting Bitcoin now on their soon to launch main store in downtown Funchal. Also the golf course. There's a lot of
the
brisket place we need, because there's a lot of demand from
Yeah,
Bitcoin.
you need some steak places to accept Bitcoin for sure.
I thought about you, and we need to go to the Muay Thai thing,
the boxing gym, the MMA. I actually searched that recently. There's like 4 or 5 MMA gyms in Funchal, and they look pretty good. You know, Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
My wife's cousin actually was one of the record. Well, he won the national league a few times in Muay Thai, and
Nice.
I can convince him to accept Bitcoin easily.
But he runs one of the gyms.
Yes.
Nice. Gigi, you've been a bit quiet. Why don't you chime in with your impressions of Madeira before I, move on to the next subject? He's gone.
Gigi's absent.
I don't need to be here anymore. All right, I'll ask Pablo something. Gotta ask about. Oh, is he back?
Oh my God. Do I have like a 20-second delay? What's going on?
We thought you bailed.
Oh my God. No, I'm still here. It seems like my microphone switched itself off or something. So I can only echo what the guys have been saying so far. So it's a very, very nice place. And it happened to me too, actually, that I just went into a random place to have coffee, and I saw Bitcoin accepted here on the cash register. And I was asking, is that true? Can I pay in Bitcoin here? And so on. And the guy was, so delighted. He was preaching to me for like 45 minutes, telling me everything about Bitcoin and how CBDCs are bad and so on. It was a really fun experience. It was great. And so I would encourage everyone to, at least come for the conference, check out the place. And I'm actually really positively surprised also about what Andre said, the merchant acceptance rate, and just also the grassroots community here. So I didn't know what to expect. Not that I had low expectations in particular or anything like that, but there's a lot of Bitcoiners here. There's a lot of also new Bitcoiners here. There's a lot of interested people. I think a lot of the people are just generally interested in the sort of financial education that is otherwise not happening, and word is going around, and people are making it happen here. And so I think we have if we can keep this momentum up, we have a very bright future ahead for Bitcoin adoption here in Madeira.
And you also said that it was a very family friendly place, which I think will appeal to a lot of people. Can you touch on that for a sec?
Yeah, definitely. So, it's, Andre mentioned it before and Pablo mentioned it too. It's just it's a very odd place geographically. And so you just have absolutely everything. Like if you like hiking, you can go hiking. If you like surfing, you can go surfing. If you like swimming, you can go swimming all year round. And there is, of course, lots of family-friendly activities that you can do. And there is again, we talked about the population size already, but there's plenty of young families with kids and so on. There's many people also that move to the mainland for university and so on, and as soon as they have kids, they come back to Madeira, and just it's a very nice and very family-friendly and very safe place and also everyone is super welcoming, and it's a very friendly community to, you know, like you'll find people to hang out with and go on play dates and whatnot immediately, I would say.
And there's also like there's sufficient weirdos around, and by that I mean like people that reject the fiat everything of the world, be it food, education, healthcare. Like there's niche communities that are doing things differently.
John, you can go down to the docks, to the wave breakers, and live in the holes with the other weirdos, exiting society completely.
Excellent.
That's not an issue.
Good to hear. Andre, before I move on, anything else you wanted to mention about the conference?
Well, you know, just you know, an overall invite for people to come, as Gigi was saying. I think it's going to be, well, I'm biased, of course, but I think we're going to make it for a great week in Madeira. And you know, Madeira is already, like Rob was saying the other day, there's no way you can lose. Like Madeira is already a very good place to visit. So you know, just visit, come for vacations. And we'll try to also push you up to real great conference in the middle and a lot of satellite events. You'll have a lot to choose from. And I think it's going to be pretty enjoyable, especially if you come with the family, and you know, it's going to be great.
Awesome. All right. I got to ask everyone, but particularly Pablo, about Javier Milei. What are your thoughts?
It's exciting. I hate all politicians. With that caveat, and particularly, I don't think there is ever a solution in politics, because all permissions that are granted can be taken away.
Right.
With that said, it's good. Politicians cannot be a solution, but they can be a problem. The removal of a problem is a positive. I'm not skeptical. I'm not. It's exciting to see that the socialists, it's hard to describe what the party that has been ruling Argentina for the past, out of the past 24 years, they've ruled 20. During those other 4 years that they didn't rule, it was within Argentina, it would be like a conservative, very Chicago school style conservative that was very polite and was very well mannered. And obviously the communists just ransacked the guy. He wasn't able to do anything at all because he was just trying to negotiate with terrorists, basically. So the fact that Milei campaign with the chainsaw, I would like to see a Bukele-style quasi-dictatorship where he takes over the court, takes over the parliament. Otherwise, he's not going to be able to do anything. All the institutions in Argentina are completely compromised. So the fact that the Argentinian president is not just Cristina Kirchner or any of these corrupt politicians or Fernandez or whoever it might be, it's nice, but it's way insufficient unless he really goes heavy-handed and he puts all these corrupt people in jail or kills them. Like, killing them would be fantastic. Like, bring back the guillotines. Like, yes. But, like, really, these people, Cristina Kirchner has stolen so much money from what is now an extremely poor nation that Putin looks like nothing. Putin is a kid compared to the amount of GDP percentage that she has stolen from Argentina. So it's exciting from the point of view that they didn't win again. That's good. Maybe he can actually do something if he goes really heavy-handed. But NVK said this, and I think it's a very good way to put it. Regardless of what happens with Milei, regardless of is he actually going to close the Argentinian central bank, let's hope he does. But whether he does it or not, the fact that he won sends a very clear message to all these parasites that there is a line that can be crossed. Like there is a thing as stealing too much. So I don't know. I was very excited when I saw it happening. I was very excited. I was excited that he didn't completely walk back after winning. He didn't completely walk back everything he had said. He's currently staying kind of on message with regards to, like he said recently, closing the Argentinian Central Bank is non-negotiable. We are going to do it. It's kind of nice that he didn't say, "Oh, it's rhetoric." I didn't actually mean that I was going to close it. So yeah, we'll see what happens. The current party is going to make his life absolute hell, and like he doesn't have a lot of power, or he has no power in parliament. So yeah, we'll see. I'm happy, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, one, in terms of being on brand, I did see him hanging out with Bill Clinton yesterday in the States, I think. So that was right. But and in terms of his power, I mean, I presume you mean it would be great if he could prosecute, all the crooks from previous governments, and that justice would be done to them. I assume that's what not going full on actual dictator mode,
So you can see the extent of how ingrained the corruption is in Argentina. We had a general attorney. This was probably like, I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago or something like that was investigating the Cristina Kirchner, who at the time was the vice president, and he was investigating her for all kinds of crimes. Like, name the crime, she had done it, from jaywalking all the way to killing people, stealing billions, like everything. And this guy was going to testify in front of Congress, like present a formal accusation of the vice president to remove the, I don't know how you call it in English, fueros. It's like a power that someone like a vice president or someone in the Senate, they cannot be sued. So they were going to strip them.
Immunity?
Yeah, like immunity. Yeah, immunity. And the guy just so happened that he decided to, Epstein himself on the night before testifying, and nothing ever happened.
Right.
The people, the asset that killed the guy is known, is within the inner circle of Cristina Kirchner. Like, everybody knows what happened, but nothing happened to her. Right. Like the extent of, imagine if you were able to tell what happened with Epstein down to who killed him and the connection to the Clintons or whatever.
And it didn't matter.
That's the case here.
Yeah.
And nothing happened. Like, the corruption is so profound that you cannot, just because the presidency is different, you're going to do away with it. So yeah. Well,
there's, and this is the case in so many countries, right? There's just untouchables, right? It doesn't matter what people do. What are you going to do? They are the authority. So if they lie, if they cheat, if they steal, and it's obvious, I mean, it's even the greater insult, because it's like they know that they're doing it, and they do it anyways, because what the hell are you going to do about it? And for me, the encouraging aspect of the whole Milei thing, as you say, maybe he's going to be so hamstrung, maybe he's going to be taken out, maybe he's actually not what he's made himself out to be. But the fact that his rhetoric was so quote unquote extreme or so divergent from typical rhetoric, and that it resonated with people, is what's interesting to me. So, like, sure, most of those people are probably going to be disappointed, but it does seem to be signaling that these people are receptive to these ideas of much smaller government and much more freedom and much more like fiscal and other forms of responsibility. And maybe that means they'll be receptive to the Bitcoin thesis ultimately. Like, maybe this is because a lot of Bitcoiners started on the whole libertarian path, right? And they eventually made their way to seeing the rationale behind Bitcoin. So, maybe once their hopes are dashed by another politician, they'll be looking for something that can, meet their hopes with less likelihood of disappointment, but which actually achieves not even just the same aim, but ultimately or same objective, but even a better objective than just voting harder, let's say. So hopefully that's the case. And, you know, you bring up Bukele. I'm sure some people would take issue with his characterization, but I saw his speech or with your characterization of him, but I saw his speech yesterday because he's like leaving now for a bit to do the campaign, and somebody else is kind of going to be in. I think it's a workaround so he can run again. I'm not sure of the details, but he's leaving for a few months, and he brought the executive branch together. There was like 50 people that he was speaking to, and they're all, you know, higher ups in the executive part of the government. And he basically, it was like a spanking session. He was like, look, first of all, you're all being investigated, all of you, and by the Attorney General here on my left. And if he finds anything, you're going to be prosecuted just like anybody else. And for those of you, and also like I'm coming back, or there's going to be a new cabinet or government in June 1st of 2024. Nobody is guaranteed a position in that. If you want to keep your job, you have to excel. I want you to give 110%, 24/7. And remember, you're not like, don't ask me for favors, and like, you're not spending my money. I can't help you. You're stewards of the people's money. And you know, so like, but and the message was like, if you fucked up, I'm gonna get you. I'll be watching while I'm gone. And if you want to keep your job, you better act like it. And again, still in the realm of politics, all the criticisms that are legitimate of that domain. But it's refreshing, at least, to hear a politician speak like that to basically what are in most other circumstances are his cronies, right? The people that enable each other. It's like, well, I won't tell on your corruption if you don't tell on my corruption, and we'll all get rich together, and who the fuck's going to do anything about it because we're the boss, right? It's kind of nice. So we shall see how that goes, and to what extent it'll be replicated in Argentina. But I guess the broader message, and I know like the political pendulum always kind of swings. I mean, it's nice, as you were saying, that in Argentina, where they just kept, again, even with the corruption, you've told me, and other Argentinians I know have told me, that just the mentality of the people was still such that they kept voting for these crazy socialist, you know, policies, despite how horrible it was for them. You know, it's like a very Stockholm syndrome-y sort of thing. And it's nice that maybe that's starting to shift a bit. I mean, we're seeing these anti-far left, you know, parties and people being elected in different places. You know, they're characterized as extreme right, far right, you know, by legacy media. Who knows what the truth is, but it's obvious that it's divergent from what has been the norm for the last, you know, 20 years or so. And I guess that's somewhat encouraging, if for no other reason. Like, again, like maybe, you know, the end result will be the same, but a little schism in people's perspective for other things to slip in during that schism, right? When people really start to think, okay, maybe we really should change how we've been thinking about things. And amidst that change in perspective, other more, you know, more valid or more effective tools, changes, stuff like that. Obviously, we would make the argument for Bitcoin and Nostr and freedom tech generally might have the capacity to slip in during that process of people thinking about things differently, you know? So hopefully that's the case.
I think when there are these incredible shocks, obviously COVID is a great example of a massive shock that awakens a lot of people, that allows them to see reality from a different perspective. And even within COVID, which I would say is probably the within this type of shocks, the largest we've seen in a really, really long time.
Totally.
It might awaken 1%, like awaken to the point of action. Like you, John, you took action after the COVID. Francis and Alex and a bunch of Bitcoiners took action. Like, we didn't just say, "Oh, this is terrible." We modified our life based on that input. And I think the stuff that has been happening on Argentina is similar, with inflation just going like incredibly rampant. Inflation went from hurting a lot in Argentina in the past decade to now the problems that it's creating on a day-to-day basis, to a very significant part of the population is very strong, and that type of shock might have persuaded, again, a 1% to make a change, to look for something different. Even if it's still within the realms of politics. So it's the same type of answer. It's a different answer, but it's the same type of answer. But it modified the conduct of some people. And I don't think you need to modify the conduct of 100% of the people. I think modifying the conduct of 1% of people has huge downstream implications. And again, pointing down to COVID, we see that the world has changed profoundly, even though most people still think the lockdowns were fantastic, we need to get the booster, but the world has changed. The world has changed and some new doors have been opened. So I'm even within changing your vote and voting from A to B is significant. I think it creates another crack, because out of the people that change from voting to the communists to voting to Milei, maybe 1% of those voters will keep digging and keep looking into it and will realize that it doesn't really matter whether it's A or B, it's the whole system is at fault. So I'm hopeful in that sense. I don't think it creates such a seismic shift where everybody really becomes a Bitcoiner or anything like that, but maybe 1% or maybe 0.1%. And that makes a world of difference.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And, I know there's still crazy, fucked up shit everywhere. And there's a lot of the same agendas are still operating, and psyops are everywhere, and the whole thing, right? But I don't know. I'm pretty darn optimistic these days, mostly because of Bitcoin and Nostr and the things that we always talk about. But there seems to be, well, like you said, I mean, even if it's just a fraction of 1%, that shift in perception and how it influences, or not how it influences, but like when I meet new people, the degree to which there's like a little bit more of an opening up of perspective, a little bit of broadening of perspective, a little bit of receptivity to thinking differently and exploring, different ideas and different, types of conversations and stuff. It's encouraging, I guess is the right way to put it. And so what more can you ask for than things kind of directionally going in a positive way? So bullish, I guess, is my point.
As well. I'm extremely optimistic as well, because I see that we have the tools to create the kind of world that we want to see. Right. And it's way broader than Bitcoin or Nostr. Is family, is homeschooling, is creating community. One of the very incredible traits of being here in Madeira is that I'm creating communities with like-minded people who we share values with, which is so rare. And
so important. I mean, there's nothing really more important than that.
Important. It's so important. I'll say it's much more important than Bitcoin. Bitcoin is just a part of it.
Well, Bitcoin's a huge catalyst for it, right? I mean, it identifies people and brings them together. But yeah, I agree. I mean, it's the end all be all, right? Pretty much.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And the end goal for free Madeira.
There we go.
And the what?
And the end goal for free Madeira.
Yeah. Well, that's definitely an admirable and legitimate end goal to have. So,
we had a birthday party a few days ago, and we got together, and it was all people that are into freedom, basically. Right. But it so happens, but we were just hanging out. It just happens that all the people that were there we all share the same values, whether they're Bitcoiners or not. We all share the same values, and that's absolutely incredible. Yeah,
couldn't agree more. All right, gents. Well, we're basically up on time. I know we could keep going forever, but we'll put a pin in it for now, and spark another one up some other time. But any last words before we shut it down? Andre, we start with you.
Well, just, repeating myself, but just, come and visit. The conference is a good time to do it. Madeira is great all year round, so it can be in any other time. We have the meetups, we have the community, so just pop up and we'll have a beer together.
I have a random question. I forgot. I wanted to ask you. Figs, like fresh figs. Do they grow in Madeira?
Yes.
Okay. That's a huge plus for me. Pablo?
Actually, figs are very good in the other smaller island in Portugal.
What about olives? That's another important one.
Olives, there's more in the mainland. There's a lot, of course.
Right,
We are,
sure.
I think we are the largest producer worldwide of olive oil, and maybe Spain.
Yeah,
also,
maybe
but
I think it's Spain, but yeah.
Spain, but Portugal is way close to that because there's a
Spain
lot.
is way bigger.
Yeah,
The south of Spain is all olives.
well, maybe. But we don't like Spanish. Our olive oil is way better. So, but yeah, especially in the mainland. But figs you can find here, so for sure.
Amazing. Pablo?
One of the things that I've been thinking is that there are some hacks that make life so much easier. And one of them is realizing that you have so much agency and a small decision can improve your life. It can have a multiplying effect that is wild, that you think about it and you don't realize how easy it is to improve your life. And many times is you want to go to a place, you just literally just go kayak.com or kiwi.com or any of these sites, just enter the site and just go for a week or 2 weeks and you'll see things in a different perspective. I've had this when during the lockdowns, we decided to go to Costa Rica, as you know, and we were thinking, oh, maybe we should go and check it out. And then we said, let's just move there. We had never been there before, and we just moved with a small kid. And it's just a small decision that you make, and then after the decision, maybe you have a to-do list of, okay, I need to sell this and get rid of that and look into this. But the trigger is the decision, and the decision can improve your life. I pose that coming to Madeira can be that kind of decision where you're listening to a podcast. Literally, I'm in Madeira because I listened to your podcast, John, with Andre and Rob. And I was in Thailand. And I immediately messaged Rob because he was talking about the homeschooling and stuff like that. And 2 weeks later, like a month later, I was here in Madeira just because of that podcast. I will I post that maybe you can be listening to a podcast that touches on Madeira, and you, before finishing the podcast, you go to kayak.com and you buy a flight for a week or 10 days or whatever it might be, and maybe it will change your life.
So true. I love it. Gigi?
Well, yeah, I don't have too much to add to that. I would say, in general, try to make these little decisions to maneuver yourself into a better position. I mean, I guess that's what the struggle of life is all about. And I think going forward, it will be increasingly important to learn how to use the tools that you will need in the digital space to remain self-sovereign. And I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here, of course, but really learn how to use Bitcoin, how to use Bitcoin in a self-sovereign way, learn how to use Nostr, learn how to use Nostr over Tor, learn how to use all these things, because I think the rug pulls will continue until morale and freedom improves. And so we see this both in the legacy world and in the Bitcoin world. I think the rug pulling and the deplatforming will continue, and hopefully it won't get too bad, but it's better to be prepared beforehand and know how these things work and get comfortable with all of that, because if you actually have to learn all of this on the fly while you need to flee your jurisdiction or whatever, then it's going to be hard.
Totally. Couldn't agree more. And actually, Andre, is that something that the conference will have? There's so much kind of freedom tech emerging. Will there be workshops for people that, want to kind of start on that path of like, hey, how do I take the first step in digital sovereignty sort of thing?
So not only inside the venue, but also inside some satellite events. For example, we have a noob day that we're calling Bem-vindo ao Bitcoin, and welcome to Bitcoin, on the day before the conference, 100% in Portuguese. A full program. It was inspired by Tim. You know, Tim is actually coming, Wizard of Oz. And we have inside the conference as well several different rooms by different people with different workshops, and not only theory but also practical workshops. Like BTC session, we'll have a room. Bayanark has another room with the community of the LN bits and maker bits, and also the My First Bitcoin, Looking Glass, and MTH guys will have another room with workshops on the money fundamentals, I guess. But so there's someone for something for everyone, I guess.
Amazing. Well, I can't wait. I think it's going to be an awesome conference. I can't wait to visit Madeira, hang out with you guys, eat some good food, have some beers, eat some figs. It's going to be fantastic. So
I have to bring some fresh figs from
make sure there's some figs there.
I'll put it on the to-do list right now, man.
But I'm super pumped. And I hope people that are interested check it out. What's the domain for it, Andre?
BitcoinAtlantis.com, and you can follow us. There's a freemadeira.com website as well, but we have to update it soon. But also just follow us on the socials, I guess, on Twitter, Bitcoin Atlantis, and freemadeira.org, and subscribe to the newsletter. We'll send frequent details on everything that's happening and informing all the updates and the speakers and the satellite events and so on.
Nice. And Pablo, I know it's the cohort's full and stuff, but people that just want to check out what you and Gigi are doing in the next couple months, how can they do that?
It's sovereignengineering.io. So the first cohort is full, like you just said, but we are very eager to receive applications for the second one. We already received very strong applications for people that I think it's like around May, and that time works better for some people. So if you are remotely interested in something like this, to come and build stuff with us on whatever you want that is related to freedom tech, definitely apply as soon as possible. Amazing.
Well, I can't wait to see what the product of the first go round of that is. I'm sure I'll hear all about it in Madeira. So yeah, good luck with it, Gigi and Pablo, and Andre. Good luck in the home stretch of getting everything ready for the conference, and I'll see you boys soon.
Thank you.
Thanks for the time. See you, boys.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Thank you.